Well, tomorrow is National Adoption Day, and I'd like to share the story of three people right here in Connecticut with very different backgrounds who all have one thing in common, and that is that they all embarked on a journey to discover and find their biological family, and one of them being my very own dad. Take a look.
Ever since I was a kid, I did this with your older brother's baseball games. I've always sat in the stands, and I've looked at the kids on the field, and I've matched them up with their parents, and I'm real good at doing that. And I do that because I think inside I was always looking for someone that I look like.
I was adopted in a very multicultural family, so I definitely did not look like my parents, who are both white. You know, they always say, oh, the teenage years, it's finding out who you are. But when you're adopted, and for me being biracial, it's not that easy.
Around the age of 18 or 19, I really started to have a longing to look for my birth mother. And I had minimal information and searched on my own and was unable to find her.
I did day trips to New Jersey. I went to the town where I was born. I went through public records. I went to hospitals. I went to bars and asked about local families that had, my mother was the oldest of 14.
So when I turned 18, my mom actually helped me search for my birth mom.
I searched, I got a letter of non-identifying information from the adoption agency, and they tell you everything. First line I'll never forget said my mother was 33 when I was born, and she was of Hungarian descent. And until that moment, May 5th, 1983, I had no idea what nationality I was.
We found out who my birth mom was, but she wished to not be contacted and asked me to go through Catholic Charities as sort of the intermediary.
I went and knocked on her door for the first time, and it was the first time in my life that I had looked in the mirror, so to speak, and seen anyone that looked like me. And she shared her story with me and told me who my birth father was, and I called him up, and his wife had since passed, but the two of them had had a 10-year relationship. And that produced 5 of us that she put up for adoption. And he had 8 kids by his wife. So I went from not knowing anything to finding out that I was the next to youngest of 13, which was kind of overwhelming.
Due to a state law enacted in 1975 to protect the privacy of the birth mothers, adult adoptees adopted before October 1st of 1983 are denied access to their original birth certificates.
Most people probably don't realize that we have no biological medical history.
Well, it took Ryan's mom and I 13 years to have him. And in that process, when I went to one of the specialists, and we each went to several, I was given my medical records, and when you're adopted, you're kind of taught to just regurgitate information from your adoptive family, which isn't true. It's just the story. It's part of the lie, part of the story of being adopted. And when I said, oh, I'm adopted, he put a big X through it. Never forget that. 3
years ago, I actually had a mammogram done, which happily was a normal mammogram, but the radiologist said she thought I should definitely have the test, but because I did not have biological medical history, the test would cost me $3,000. And for the non-adopted population in Connecticut who have their biological medical history, the cost of the test was $0.
There are answers that I need to figure out for myself. And this law will help me do that.
All right, joining me now here in studio is Karen Caffrey from Access Connecticut, an organization that is working towards getting the original birth certificates for people right here in Connecticut who were adopted. Last year, Karen, you guys did great work passing a law that enabled people that were born after 1983 to get access to their original birth certificate, but there's still a problem for people born before 1983. Why is that?
Well, there was an affidavit in Connecticut that allowed birth parents, or that informed birth parents, that their adult offspring might find their identities when they reach the age of 18. Mm-hmm. So that was a legislative compromise. It was, I think the legislature felt it was a good first step to doing what we really see from hearing these stories is the right thing. I mean, it's kind of common sense that people should have the right to know where they came from.
Right, and also back in 1975 when this law was passed, there was sort of a different vibe and thought process towards adoption, and younger women getting pregnant in that sense, and now it's a little more open in that sense. So how can people really support? Because it's important that these people can access their original medical records, which is really the whole point of it.
Absolutely. Well, the most important thing is to contact your state legislator. We have representatives and senators, state senators, and the way to find out who they are, if you don't know, is to go to the website of the Connecticut legislature. It says find your legislature. You put in your street address and it tells you who they are, but give them a phone call or an email and say, I want this law to pass, and they listen. They listened to us in 2014. You can also sign up for our email newsletter at accessconnecticut.org and follow our Facebook page, because we have constantly updating information about what we're doing, events we're having, and information that we hope will get this law completely changed in Connecticut in 2016.
Well, it's great work that you're doing with Access Connecticut, Karen. Thank you so much for joining us here today on
My
CT
pleasure.
Style.
Thank you for having us.
Again, all you have to do is head on over to accessconnecticut.org to help some of these people born before 1983 right here in Connecticut to access their original birth certificates so that they have access to some of these medical records. So now we're going to send things over to Miss Teresa.